So, let's talk about rent. No, I'm not here to remind you to pay your landlord. I'm here to talk about the 1996 Pulitzer Prize, Tony Award-winning musical, Rent.
How we gonna pay last year's rent?
Which was also made into a movie in 2005. But we are here to talk about the stage play. Whether you're a musical theater fan or not, you've probably at least heard of it. No? Okay, maybe if I play this song.
525,600 minutes.
Yep, that's it. This is the musical that teaches you how many minutes are in a year. If you're an avid musical theater fan like me, then you probably either absolutely love this musical or absolutely hate it. Personally, I'm the former. I've seen this musical twice while I was on tour. I've seen the movie countless times and I know all the words off by heart. While I do recognize the many flaws of this musical, such as the sugarcoating of the 1980s AIDS crisis and its questionable characters, I hold a bit of sentimental value towards this musical because, I grew up listening to this soundtrack. Yes, I know it's probably not the most appropriate musical to grow up listening to, but my mom, she loved it. She'd always sing all the songs of my aunts and uncles at the piano, and she played the soundtrack and watched the movie all the time, so I was a kid, so it's not like I knew that they were singing about AIDS and dying and all these other heavy themes. Anyways, regardless of whether you love it or hate it or have never seen it, it has definitely ingrained itself into not just musical theater pop culture, but into pop culture in general.
We actually really all want to thank you for everything.
Oh my God, something's happening.
Seasons of love. Seasons of love.
Throughout all my various listening/viewings of this musical, there was always one part in particular that always stood out to me. So in the musical, there's a number called La Vie Boheme, which is basically all the main characters singing about sticking it to the man in this cafe in front of some wealthy landowner.
La vie boheme. La vie boheme.
And there's a part that goes like this.
And Roger will attempt to write a bittersweet, evocative song that doesn't remind us of Musetta's waltz.
And since watching/hearing that, there's always one thought that stuck into my mind. What the hell is Musetta's waltz? Because that little riff he played isn't just a one-time thing. It's a musical motif that appears throughout the whole musical.
You can see it in my eyes.
So it just furthered my question further. What the hell is Musetta's waltz? So, naturally I turned to our trusty pal Google and found that Musetta's waltz, or Quando Men Vo, is a soprano aria, or solo piece from the 1896 opera La Boheme, which Rent is loosely based upon. And let me tell you, when 14-year-old me found that out, I felt completely lied to, because I thought it was like a completely original story. But no, it is appropriation. Now, I know what you're thinking. Appropriation, that sounds really bad. Not necessarily. In short, appropriation in the art world is simply borrowing ideas from other works, usually without the owner's consent. But the writer for La Boheme had been dead for about 70 years anyway, so I don't think the writer of Rent could have asked the writer of La Boheme even if he wanted to. Plus, La Boheme was in the public domain anyways. But it doesn't change the fact that it's appropriation because Rent borrowed ideas from La Boheme. But the question is, just how much did Rent appropriate from La Boheme? And now, after 6 years of wondering that question, I finally sat down and watched all 2.5 hours of La Boheme, and I can finally answer that for you, which is A lot. So, let's start with the source material. La Boheme. La Boheme premiered in 1896, which coincidentally was 100 years prior to Red's premiere in 1996. It was written by Giacomo Puccini and set in the 1800s in Paris, but was sung in Italian. It opens on Christmas Eve in the apartment of Marcello, a painter, and Rodolfo, a poet, who are struggling artists and are singing about being cold and poor. So they burn Rodolfo's poems in order to stay warm. The friends, Colline, a philosopher, and Chouinard, a musician, show up with various goods for them. Chouinard sings about how he got the money because some rich person employed him to play music to a parrot until it drove it insane and killed itself. Yeah, I don't know about that either. The landlord, Vietois, shows up to collect their rent. But they don't want to pay it, so they get him drunk, and he ends up confessing to cheating on his wife, in which they kick him out of the apartment due to moral objections, aka they just didn't want to pay the rent. They all decide to go to the Latin Quarter to go to the Café Momus, but Rodolfo decides to stay behind for a few minutes to finish an article he is writing. And what's this? There's a knock at the apartment door. It's a beautiful young girl named Mimi, who's an embroiderer. She asks Rodolfo to light her candle because she too is poor and cold and visibly feeble. Spoiler alert, it's because she's sick with tuberculosis. Rodolfo and Mimi sing a lovely duet together. They fall in love and decide to go together to the Christmas market in the Latin Quarter to meet the others, where they buy even more various goods. They reconvene, go ahead with their plan to go to the Café Momus, and run into Marcello's ex, Musetta, a singer, who's also very flirtatious. Musetta had left Marcello for an older, wealthier man named Aldin Soro, aka her sugar daddy. Now, I mentioned that Musetta is a flirt. She knows this, and she sings a song about it in an attempt to get Marcello back, and she does. And she leaves poor Alcindoro to pay both of their bills. And then we just randomly jump to February and we find out that Rodolfo had broken up with Mimi because she had been flirting with other guys, when in reality, Rodolfo's just really possessive over her and kind of toxic, not gonna lie. So, Mimi goes to Marcello because he knows he's best friends with Rodolfo and tries to get him to talk some sense into him, in which he does try. And eventually, Rodolfo admits that the real reason he broke up with Mimi is because he found out that she has tuberculosis and he doesn't want his poor living conditions to worsen her illness. Mimi overhears all of this and confronts Rodolfo about this, and they decide to stay together up until the spring because the winter is harsh and they need company. I'm not sure. Meanwhile, Musetta is once again flirting with other guys and Marcello isn't having it, so they fight about it. It skips once again, months later. We don't know how long it's been, but it's snowing out again. We're back in the apartment with both Marcello and Rodolfo, and we find out that they have both broken up with their girlfriends, and they sing about their exes while they do their work. Colline and Chouinard show up once again and bring over more goods, and they have a jolly good time. That is until Musetta bursts in a panic, saying that she found Mimi nearly dead in the street, and that they can't get her up the stairs because she's too weak. They get her up the stairs and into the apartment, and they each go out to get help, except for Rodolfo, leaving him to have a moment alone with Mimi. They reconvene, Mimi dies, and Rodolfo screams, sings in anguish. End. Now, if you don't know the plot of Rent, I don't even have to summarize it for you, because it's exactly the same plot. Everything that has happened in the La Boheme summary has happened in Rent. Yes, even the whole getting hired to kill an animal by playing music thing. That happened. That's a whole musical number.
This guitar and Vita just won't shut up. I believe if you play non-stop, that pump will breathe its very last high-strung breath.
Instead of Rodolfo, you get Roger, a musician. Marcello, Mark, a filmmaker. Musetta, Maureen. Colline, Collins. Vietois, Benny. Chouinard, Angel Dumont Chouinard. They didn't even bother changing Mimi's name. But she's not an embroiderer. She's a stripper. And she's 19. Alcindoro is pretty much Joanne, except they changed his gender. But they also took a lot from Marcello, since it's Joanne who ends up with Maureen in the end, and not Mark. Though Mark is still Maureen's ex. Place is setting of Paris to New York City, the 1800s to the 1980s, the Latin Quarter to the East Village, the Café Momus to the Life Cafe, tuberculosis to AIDS, the annoying parrot to an Akita dog, and boom, You've got Rent. Now where Rent differs is its modernization of the original material. Or should I say, postmodernization. Postmodernism uses popular and mass culture to refer back to real life. Rent does this very well by setting its musical in a very realistic setting and is enhanced by the viewer's prior knowledge of the historical context. It was written as a political statement in response to the reign of Ronald Reagan and the poor handling of the AIDS crisis in the 1980s due to conservative and homophobic views. The whole message of the show is to challenge society, to stick it to the man, and question the whole foundation of societal norms in addition to class itself. It utilizes jaded knowledge and irony to highlight the issue of corporate greed and the struggles of Bohemian life. It uses the postmodernist trait of reflexivity through its character Mark, who serves as the musical's narrator and will often talk to the audience throughout the show. It features queer couples with Angel and Collins and Maureen and Joanne, as well as people of color with Angel, Mimi, Collins, Joanne, and Benny, to show a better representation of the cultural diversity of New York City. The biggest difference, though, I think, when comparing Rent to La Boheme is who dies in the end. Because while Mimi does lay dying in Roger's arms and does actually die, she's miraculously revived. It's Angel who actually ends up dying because of AIDS. Because he's the heart of the show, and it's symbolic because when he dies, the friend group is destroyed. Oh yeah, Mimi also isn't the only one with AIDS. Angel, Collins, and Roger all have AIDS. But all in all, Rent did appropriate the entire plot to La Boheme, and just straight up stole Musetta's waltz to use as a musical motif. But again, appropriation isn't inherently a negative thing. In fact, it's a commonly used strategy in political art, which Rent is a very good example of. So, 14-year-old Amara, don't get too down about the fact that Rent appropriated La Boheme. It merely built upon La Boheme's strong foundation to speak up for the little guy, to give a voice to people like you. Or should I say me?